Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour. It's our weekly broadcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas, latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. This is episode 163. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Doing real well. In honor of our guest, I brought some Yorkshire tea, which is basically a fist in the face of caffeine. So I'm wired and awake.
Is it gold or just regular?
It's the breakfast brew. Ooh. It's pretty good. A slightly different flavor than the regular sub brand.
Gotcha. My favorite's gold. Hey, Vince, I saw you drinking. Are you drinking Yorkshire as well?
No. This is actually a nice solid chai here. And little spicy. I like a little bit of spice in the morning to wake me up rather than the caffeine.
Just like your personality. Hip and spicy and awake in the morning.
Thank you. I like this.
Come on, man. That's my worst segue yet. I'm just going to go to Dan on that one.
Hey, what's happening?
What's up, Dan?
I am also drinking a chai.
Ooh. Not the same chai, because you guys are pretty far away.
Yeah, we're pretty far away, man. Yeah. It's sad.
That'd be kind of weird if you're drinking the same chai.
That would be man, maybe we could can we do that? It's just
all right.
Both you have the continuity because you both have a white cup, I think. All right, Chase, you got to beat this comedy act.
All right, so I don't drink tea. I drink OJ. And it's gone.
There's no OJ in there. There's no proof of that.
Yeah, because I drink it. Just take my word for it.
I like the IKEA glass.
Well, anyway, we're here welcoming Daniel to our little happy bunch of weirdos. How you doing, Daniel?
Oh, I'm hoping to fit right into your happy bunch of weirdos if I can. I'm doing well, thanks.
Welcome.
It's good to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us. For those who don't know, we're doing this on Saturday because we really wanted to talk about Dorico and Steinberg, and the hours between England and California are pretty stark, obviously. So so people who will be tuning into this show on Monday will find that it's not a live show. This will be something that we record on Saturday and that they're seeing Monday. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me to be here.
How we might as well just kick it right off. And I was going to ask you if you could start off with your history and how you got involved in Dorico.
Sure. I'll try to keep it short because I have a tendency to go on a lot. So just, hit me.
Please do.
If you need me to. Shut up. So yeah, we've been at Steinberg for 5 years now. We started in November, actually on my birthday, November 2012. And prior to that, nearly all of us in the team had been working on Sibelius for many, many years. I started working on Sibelius in 1999, just after the Windows version came out, just before the Mac version came out. I was doing tech support for them. At the time, I'd just finished my music degree, and I had been doing sort of odd jobs whilst supporting a singing, not a career, but a singing job at a cathedral near Cambridge, where Sibelius was based. And, doing a bunch of other jobs, working at a computer shop for a bit. I was a secretary to a social studies lecturer for a while, all this kind of stuff. Nothing was really particularly inspiring or really even paying the bills, to be honest. But luckily, the organist at the cathedral got an email that said, hey, they're looking for some people at Sibelius, and I interviewed and they hired me, and it was just, it was wonderful. It was joining a company that was small at the time. I think it was sort of employee number 12 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Run by still very much, Ben and Jonathan Finn, the founders of the company, still very much in charge. And they luckily they saw something in me. They gave me the manual to write, and then over time they put me in charge of what these days we call product management, but which we didn't have a name for in those days, being sort of a small growing company. And once they decided to sell the company in 2006 to DigiDesign, as it was then, although Digi was of course owned by Avid at that point, it was still before everything was all kind of folded together into the one Avid name. And we had some fairly happy years. First few years under the Avid brand were good, and then Avid went through some big sort of restructurings, I suppose is the way you'd put it. They changed their management. They decided to integrate all of the various different companies together, and they started cutting staff and all sorts of stuff. And things kind of took a bit of a turn from there. But us in the Sibelius development team, we kind of soldiered on merrily enough, working on the product until the summer of 2012, when they decided they needed to close our office in London. So at that point, they wanted to put all of the development work offshore into the Ukraine, where they already had some subcontractors basically doing a bunch of other work. And that was obviously very, very distressing for us. But to our amazement, we were then, before we'd kind of quite got out the door, we got wind that Steinberg would be interested in hiring us. And that was just the most, it was a real sort of Hail Mary pass thing. We were really, really miserable that summer. Yeah. It's like the worst relationship breakup I've ever been through, I must say. And I've been through some bad ones, but that one was the absolute worst. The whole lying on your bed, listening to sad songs, it was dreadful. It really was dreadful. I know it sounds like I'm being glib about it, but it really was bad. But yeah, amazingly, we got this opportunity to join Steinberg, and so a bunch of us were left turning off the lights at the old Sibelius office, and then a few weeks later, we were starting again, in a little basement room in a temporary office near King's Cross Station with no computers, just some notepads and our brains. And it was wow. And we've been having a really great time, a very challenging time, definitely. And we've set ourselves a lofty goal to build something that is going to not only be the equal of Sibelius and Finale, but hopefully surpass them. But we're just so grateful to Steinberg for giving us another chance and being able to still work together, because many of us have been working together since we were fresh out of college, basically. So to be able to keep the team together was really, really incredible. And so we are doing everything we can to repay the faith and the money that Steinberg has invested in the team by building something really tremendous.
Now, Sibelius's code base goes back to 2002 or so. And when you found yourself starting afresh, after the terror of unemployment had subsided, did you see it as a blessing in disguise? Was this an opportunity to go and redo things, reapproach decisions you had made a decade and a half ago?
Do you know what? Sibelius's code base actually goes back to 1986, would you believe? It actually predates Finale, when the Finn twins started working on it when they were still at secondary school then, before they'd even got to college. And the first Acorn version, which was all written in assembler on RISC PC, came out in 1993. Wow. The Windows version, which was rewritten again in C++. So I think Jonathan toyed with everything in Java, and I think he may have even tried it in x86 assembler as well, but it eventually came out in C++ at the end of 1998. So Sibelius's Windows code base and its Mac code base is 20 years old. And of course, it's a good, coming on 5.5 years since we were working on it. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely. It's obviously terrifying being given literally a blank piece of paper, and say, here you go, write a whole new one of these things that we know, from our experience takes years and is quite difficult and so on. But on the other hand, it was an amazing opportunity, because I think the thing was not so much that we could take advantage of new technology, although we could, and Dorico, for example, is a very high performance modern C++ application. It's uses hyperthreading and multi-threads and all those things that I sort of vaguely understand, at least in principle, but not in practice, because I'm a musician person rather than a programmer person. But I think really it was more the opportunity to use the experience we'd gained in knowing what musicians actually need and want their software to do. When Ben and Jay started with Sibelius, their real goal was to make it quicker and easier to put together effectively camera-ready artwork, for music printing, rather than necessarily to help people learn to compose or teach music theory or produce, music for games or for films or for commercials or whatever else it might be. And so the real advantage I think we had was having all this experience and being able to then say, well, we know that the jobs to be done for a musician have changed a good deal, in the 13 years or whatever since I'd started there, and a couple of my colleagues have been there even longer than that. So how do we build a framework? How do we design and conceptualize an application that means that there is actually somewhere for all of these jobs to be done, to fit, for it to feel natural, for it to hopefully have legs, so that we're not going to be kind of wanting to redo things again, 5 or 6 down years the line. And so far, touch wood, I touch my IKEA desk, we're doing okay on that front.
It's it's kind of amazing, actually. Dorico is, of course, extremely new, extremely fresh. It's very different from my experience with Sibelius and Finale and other weird things like Igor and that sort of stuff. But it
Shout
also
out to Igor.
very yeah, Igor's. I liked Igor back in the mid 2000s.
Very cool ideas in that program.
But it's surprisingly old school in that it's very much a computer application, unlike a lot of other computer software that comes out these days, where they have these aspirations of, oh, I am going to replace this, and I am going to have this whole entire thing, which is not just inside the computer, but also, oh, I'm going to replace staff paper. Dorico does not seem to want to replace staff paper in any way, and I was actually kind of surprised and actually a little bit hardened by it as I've been learning Dorico and practicing it over the last month or two. So
yeah, I think it's really where Steinberg comes from. I think Steinberg is kind of an old school company. We've been around for what, 34 years I think now, and Cubase has been around for the best part of 28 years, something like that. And I think we see our role, and this is why I think our team from Sibelius fits so well into the Steinberg organization, is that Steinberg is a tools maker. That's what we do. We make tools for musicians, and we sort of try to understand what musicians actually want and need, and then sort of build that. And we, I think it's not that we don't necessarily want to ever kind of replace staff paper, although I think that there is always going to be a role for paper because it's just so incredibly durable and efficient, and it doesn't require power, and it doesn't go wrong unless you really do something bad to it, like set fire to it or dunk it in water or something like that. But even then, even water doesn't normally do it in unless it was printed on a crummy inkjet printer or something. So it's not so much that we want to replace staff paper, but we do want to be able to fill some of the roles that staff paper fill for musicians. We would like Dorico, for example, to be a notation program that you can actually compose and generate ideas inside, rather than it feeling like something that comes after the ideation process, when you've already figured out what the music is going to do. We would like Dorico to be part of that process earlier on, and I think that that's somewhere where we have put a lot of effort and thought into how we can make the program feel like a natural environment for composing and generating ideas, in a way that hopefully does make it a step beyond what the older generation of programs were doing.
Okay, is it also safe to say that means you're not thinking about things like, oh, we're not wanting sorry about that. We don't want Dorico to be this massive social platform for sharing music scores everywhere, and we're going to be creating plugins in
no,
Chrome.
I think there are enough of those things already, and I think we would like Dorico to be able to play a role in whatever kind of the workflow that a particular set of customers might have. We don't, obviously, with things like the fact that we've got this integrated sequencer and we've got Cubase's audio engine built into it and so on, we have definitely tried to kind of expand the role of what a notation program is going to be in people's workflows, but it's definitely not to replace everything in their workflow. I'm sure guys like you who are working in game audio, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff with sound design, some stuff with music, some stuff with asset management, some stuff with converting things back and forth in different formats. We have no idea how we could possibly make Dorico replace every link in that chain, but where we want you to choose Dorico when the end result makes some sense to have either started or finished in music notation, and then whatever other things are in that chain, we hope we can provide you with means of getting data in and out and transferring stuff back and forth so that it fits your workflow rather than expecting you to design your workflow around it.
Right. It must be pretty nice being at a company like Steinberg, where they do have so many tools that are set for various applications. You don't have to be Cubase because there already is a Cubase. And I guess on on that note, do you have a pretty good relationship with the Cubase guys, and do you talk much about how features are going to be developed?
We do have a great relationship with some of the guys working Cubase. I mean, the way that Steinberg's set up in Hamburg in HQ. They've got many different teams, and in fact, they just moved office to a new kind of. They were on 2 floors before, and all of the engineering and testing was on 1 floor, and they're now on 5 floors, with really kind of the top floor being for the senior leadership team, and everybody else kind of spread across the 4 floors. And it's interesting going there and sort of seeing where people have ended up, and what they're trying to do over there is kind of combine. Before it was kind of engineering in one place, maybe there'd be some embedded QA people, but now they're kind of putting everybody into their teams. So there are some teams that we work with more than others for sure, but we do definitely have to work with them very closely, because the audio side of Dorico is basically kind of Cubase with its head ripped off, onto the top. And so we have to work with them quite closely to make that stuff happen. So there's a handful of guys who are really responsible for exposing the innards that we need, so we can do various bits of clamping and suturing and so on to tie the various tubes together. But it's it's always interesting going over there, because there's Steinberg's so big these days. There's nearly 200 people altogether in Steinberg, and so there's a lot of stuff going on. There's obviously not only Dorico and Cubase, but there's Nuendo, which of course has all the tremendous game audio stuff, as of the last couple of versions with the Wise integration. There's Wavelab, which just goes from strength to strength. When I was last over in Hamburg, they were just about to launch the new version of Wavelab with all this, to me at least, because again, I'm a bit of a thicko, so audio processing stuff seems like voodoo and magic to me. But this kind of spectral painting of the waveforms and so on that you can do in Wavelab now is really amazing to me. And so there's just, everywhere you look, there's really, really cool technology inside Steinberg, and I think that is certainly something that appeals to me about working for the company, is that they're not just kind of content to sit on their laurels, even though Cubase is great and Nuendo is great. They're always pushing forward, and that's certainly also something that we try to kind of espouse in the Dorico team as well. I mean, we have to, because we've got a long road to run down to kind of catch up and then overtake our competitors. But I think that we do fit nicely into how Steinberg as a whole kind of is always trying to refine those tools and expand new creative possibilities for people working with sound and music.
You touched upon the built-in sequencer that's a component of Dorico. And if one clicks on the play tab, you do see something that looks very much like maybe a cousin of Cubase or a traditional sequencer. As of the current release, it does not allow for real-time input like you'd expect in a sequencer. Is that something that we might expect in future versions?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it probably won't be in the next big one, because we've still got a few kind of notational holes to fill, although there will be a lot of focus on playback in the next big release. We're hoping to get various things which maybe I should be reticent about mentioning, just in case disasters befall us. But yeah, I mean, real-time input is obviously very, very important. I mean, it's interesting really that there's some people really sort of can't live without real-time input, and I speak as a kind of average kind of keyboard player myself. I've often struggled to get good results out of real-time input in scoring programs. Obviously, it's great for capturing the feel of a performance and so on, but to actually then end up with workable notation out the other side of it is quite a challenge. And I think Cubase does it pretty well actually, and it's got, of course, a lot of post input quantization you can do in the score editor that helps kind of tighten things up while retaining the feel. We kind of have a slightly different problem, in as much as we actually do want to capture sort of real notation rather than capturing MIDI and then inferring the notation fully from it, which is the way that obviously a sequencer works. So it's a slightly different problem. One of our developers, Paul, he's got a PhD in audio signal processing and so on, and he's got a lot of specific ideas about how you could build a quantizer that would be notation focused but still retain the feel and have a good result. You can see the beginnings of it in how Dorico imports MIDI files, because that's using the beginnings of Paul's quantizer, and it's pretty good. The certainly things like tuplet detection and so on are now very good, much better than anything we managed in the old place. But we've still got a bit more work to do to wire up the kind of real-time aspects and get that working. But it's 100% in our plans. I think it's crucial. but you know, it's one of those things where not every user is an accomplished keyboard player, and so you know, we sort of are still tackling the features that hopefully sort of appeal to even more people than real-time input, which is not to say that that's a niche feature, but it's, you know, we're just still sufficiently early in Dorico's development that we some things that are used by a few more people than that.
Yeah, it's funny mentioning real-time input. I actually am a keyboardist, so I like real-time input. Although, really the last few years of Sibelius use, I've decided to make a compromise. And I changed my playback option, so I don't use the built-in Sibelius sounds. I use Note Performer, which gives me really good playback quality. But of course, I have to sacrifice real-time input in order to be able to use that, because it gives you some lag. And that's something I was surprised that I decided to do. I like real-time input. I'm a keyboardist, but I found that it was really important to get really high quality sound out of my score even before I get to the sequencing and, you know, proper mock-up phase for my client deliverable. And then that gets me to what's going on with Dorico. How do you see things moving forward with the development of the Hallian orchestra that you've currently got there? And will we see, will we possibly see some third-party playback solutions happening?
Yes, I mean, definitely. It's not for me to kind of announce other people's products for them, so I won't. But I will say that users of Note Performer should watch this space, because I think there'll be some interesting news coming relatively soon. And I hope I'm not upsetting anybody too much by saying that. But I think that in general, you know, obviously the sounds that Dorico comes with, they are obviously the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra is quite an old library now. I think it was recorded around 2005, 2006, and obviously at the time it was like pretty cutting edge, because it was recorded 9624, and it was you know, really a pretty substantial project. And it's, you know, the nice thing is, of course, that those samples don't themselves date. They still sound just as much like a string section or a horn section, whatever as they did 10 years ago, 12 years ago. But of course, people's expectations for what they can do with sample libraries has moved on, and it seems like weekly there's a new library that comes out that's got some incredible new programming capability, or some new, you know, I must say that I think my own knowledge of the state of the art is probably a couple of years off the pace by now. But we definitely, you know, the goal is with Dorico's play mode is that, you know, yes, if you're a person like me actually who's not very proficient when it comes to you know, detailed MIDI editing and so on, you know, and the kind of work that I do, I just need to be able to tell whether I got the notes wrong, because fortunately I'm going to have my arrangements and so on sung for me by my choirs and things. But if you were really into that, you know, you need a mock-up for your client, then the goal is that Dorico should provide the tools that allow you to get all the way to that mock-up, hopefully, as long as it doesn't need to actually combine audio tracks, which of course sometimes it will, but if it can be done pretty much kind of in the box, as it were, the goal is that Dorico should be that box. And so that will include, in the fullness of time, automation, you know, both MIDI automation, VST, parametric automation, and mixer automation as well. It will include, obviously we already have in the mixer a pretty, you know, standard signal chain. We've got 4 inserts, we've got 4 sends, we've got a channel EQ. So, and you can run any VST effects plugin in there. We don't quite yet have kind of groups and sort of that kind of auxiliary busing that you would expect from your DAW. But again, the nice thing about having the Cubase audio engine is that stuff is all there. We just have to kind of do the various surgical procedures that are required and then build the UI on our side to make that stuff happen. So, you know, that definitely the goal is that, and of course we have simple piano roll editing in the sequencer at the moment. You know, you can make marquee selections of notes, you can drag them, you can copy them, you can, crucially, you can change their play duration without affecting the notated duration, so that you can keep your score looking clean. If you're lucky enough to have some, you know, some musicians coming in to record parts of it, you know, you can keep the notated bit of it clean while still doing whatever machinations you need to do to get your sample library or your virtual instrument to trigger correctly. And of course, also on top of that, we have VST expression maps, which is something that we've borrowed from Cubase, and we've actually kind of expanded the definition of expression maps a little bit. And we're sort of slightly asymmetrical at the moment, in that Cubase has a more limited set of techniques that it understands, and Dorico has a much wider selection of techniques, but Cubase has a kind of altogether more sort of refined approach to how you switch between those techniques. So articulation switching and so on is a bit easier to get going in Cubase than it is in Dorico right now. But definitely, again, as we're looking towards our next release, we want to make sure that play mode gets plenty of attention. It's one of those funny things, really, that playback is pretty much a feature that, like note input, basically 99 to 100% of users will use. So, and certainly back in the old days at Sibelius, probably over the years, we had more feature requests related to playback, all other feature areas of the program combined. It is something that's very, very important to people, and we want to give it the attention that it deserves. But at the same time, we also have this tension where, it's all very well the program having, absolutely amazing playback if the notation isn't worth a damn. There's already programs that can do the great playback. And we do want Dorico to be able to do all of that MIDI editing so that you can get to that really, really great high quality mock-up with, proper audio and proper automation and so on. But we also have to balance that with all of the stuff that we do for actual, the dots and the sticks and so on that the real humans need to read.
Most of what makes Dorico so interesting to me are some of the paradigms you use in your approach to the dots and sticks stuff, the notation. It seems like you've opted for flexibility, even occasionally at the cost of simplicity. So for example, you've got a notion of a flow, which just means any kind of continuity of music. It could be a movement, it could be an entire piece, it could be a section, it could be a scratch pad. And that's an extra word you have to learn. That's an extra concept you have to get your head around. But it gives you this flexibility in that a Dorico file can have a number of flows, and they can all be doing different things. You could have 3 movements in a scratch pad and then a piano reduction all in the same file. Whereas in Sibelius, you had the score and you had parts, and you had a way of you had a notion of where a section ended, but you didn't really have distinct pieces of music. And it seems like throughout Dorico, you've opted for flexibility, even if it meant you have to now learn what this abstract concept is. Was that fundamental to the design of the software, or is that an approach that evolved as you thought through what it was going to do?
No, it was pretty much completely fundamental. When we sat down in that little basement room near King's Cross for that first few months, and as I say, we didn't even have computers. We sat there with our notepads and we basically just kind of nutted out the conceptual design of the app. And right from the beginning, flows was a crucial thing. We may have even settled on the name flows almost instantly, and we debated that name a lot then over the intervening several years before the program actually came out, without ever really being able to find anything. And the reason we chose flows rather than anything else is because it's not suggestive of any particular span of music. It could be, like you say, it could be a movement, could be an act of an opera, could be a 24-bar cue, could be an exercise for a student, could be an ossia, could be a footnote from a historical source for some kind of musicological edition you're doing, could be literally anything. And the other thing that we liked about the term flow is that it also how Dorico's kind of page layout stuff works, which is kind of like InDesign, with frames. And InDesign, of course, those would be for text, but in Dorico, they're for music. And so, desktop publishers talk about flows of text and so on. So we wanted to have flows of music, and we really like that. But on the subject of, that abstraction and why we opted for flexibility over simplicity, I think that is a fair comment. But I think that flexibility was one of the things that we really felt the existing generation of score writing programs is missing. Something as simple as having a piece in multiple movements is actually not accommodated in the design of Sibelius and Finale. If you look up in Finale's user guide, and I'm not really picking on Finale because Sibelius isn't much better in this regard, but you look up the page in Finale's online help about how you start a new piece of music inside your Finale document. It's something like 16 steps. And it's very, very complicated, and it involves fooling it about bar lines and bar numbers and key signatures and time signatures and titles and text blocks and all this stuff. And so much of the music that people write, whether it's a songbook, whether
dramatic pause.
Mm-hmm. The internet.
Yeah. You were, sorry, it cut off for you, Daniel, just when you were talking about whether it's a songbook and then...
Gotcha. So yeah, whether it's a songbook, whether it's a musical, whether it's, the 20 cues that you need for a film, whatever it might be, it just seemed crucial to have this concept that would actually allow you to have all of these things managed centrally, reorder them. That's a simple thing, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great if you actually decided, hey, it turns out that maybe the way this piece is going, or maybe this musical, there's a dramatic thing needed, we need to move this song forward a few pages. That is an absolute nightmare to do in Finale and Sibelius if you're working in a single project. So Dorico makes it as easy as going to setup mode, grabbing the flow, dragging it and dropping it where in the order you want it to be, and that's it. One drag and everything is done. All the layouts update, everything is done. So yeah, we definitely we weren't afraid, let's put it that way, of introducing some new high level abstractions in order to try, it's not really in service of let's make the software complicated, but rather how do we model what happens in real life when you're putting together a piece of music that's going to involve some human performers. So that's why we have players rather than staves, so that you can have doublings easily, so that you can do divisions easily, which is something that we're working on right now. All these sorts of things are all about trying to make the software's abstractions actually match more what we do in real life, and that way hopefully the software is able to understand the user's intention a little better, and therefore it can actually react better and produce a better result, hopefully more quickly.
Speaking of what users are doing in real life, I get a sense, and I'm wondering if you can confirm this for me, but back when Sibelius and all those things were really hitting their stride in the 2000s, I don't think we saw quite as many dedicated laptop music composers out there. And the sense that I get from Dorico is that it's really excellent on a laptop keyboard. I'm not missing a numpad, and in some cases, I'm not even missing a MIDI keyboard. I've been trying it out on both my desktop and my laptop, and I actually feel a little bit like when I'm having a MIDI keyboard as well as my computer keyboard, I'm kind of all spread out all over the place. But if I restrict myself to just the keyboard, maybe I should just be touch typing my music in. Is that, would you say that that's actually more the ideal compared to the MIDI keyboard paradigm?
Well, I don't know if it's more ideal, but certainly we work very hard to make it feel like not a compromise. You're absolutely right to identify the laptop keyboard as well. And I happen to be talking to you this evening, sitting in front of my Mac Mini with my full-size keyboard and everything, but 99% of the time I'm on my MacBook Pro, which only has, of course, just the little keyboard. And in fact, even if you buy a new Mac these days, it doesn't come with a keypad. I know that, Vince, you're a Windows guy, so you still have full-size keyboards everywhere you look, but us Mac users have had to deal with these truncated keyboards for quite a few years now. And certainly when we were looking at wanting to make the software, the idea is that it should feel, as I say, without compromise on a laptop. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you've just got your basic laptop keyboard and one display, it should feel comfortable. But that hopefully if you get home and you're in your nice studio and you've got your multiple monitors and you've got your full-size keyboard and your MIDI keyboard, that it sort of feels like it expands to fit that environment well. But being able to touch type your music without, we didn't have MIDI input until about 3 months before Dorico came out, because of the MIDI came in with the audio engine from the Cubase guys, and that took a lot longer to get into the program than we had hoped it would. So MIDI really came in very late. It was only in the summer before Dorico came out that we could do any MIDI input. So by that stage, we'd all got quite proficient with the sort of alphabetic step time input. And I'm really pleased to hear you say that, to be honest. That's kind of one of the best compliments you could pay, because we really sweated the note input method and trying to make it feel logical and feel like you could touch type your music. So I'm really, really pleased to hear that. So thanks for saying that, Vince. It's good. I'll pay you later.
No problem. It's been fun actually trying to figure out what is the paradigm. I actually have a not a Microsoft Surface, but Dell's version of it. So it's got a touchscreen, it's got a pen, and I've been messing around with how the pen works in different applications. Obviously, for artwork, it's great, but then you go to the world of Finale and Sibelius, and now Dorico. It's like, it's a little bit weird. Sibelius, they were talking about pen last year at NAMM, and I thought, okay, this sort of works. I don't really care for it. I don't know if anyone's really doing anything in the pen world right now, except for the applications that are out there that are specifically targeting the pen. So StaffPad, I've done some experiments with StaffPad. I actually had tried writing that. Hey, what if I have a computer and a pen and no keyboard? And StaffPad actually is surprisingly good for what it is. It's no Dorico or Sibelius, but as a sketch tool, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty
and
awesome.
I'm not sure if that's really let's turn it into a question. What do you think about some of these emerging computing paradigms? Apple is really pushing, hey, do you really need a computer if you've got an iPad? And of course, on Microsoft's side, it seems like the pen is almost a standard input for high powered computers these days.
Yeah. I think it is very interesting, actually. I mean, I wouldn't say that we are not interested in doing stuff with sort of pen input. We don't have any particular expertise in that field right now, and I think that it's easy to underestimate how difficult it would be to make a natural feeling input that would, there's obviously the difference between what the human eye can perceive and what the computer can perceive in terms of a note head shape or whatever it is that you might be doing. Heaven help you if you're trying to read my chicken scratch from my student days, but I think that there is. Definitely, we are conscious of the fact that there are different input methods that are better suited for different jobs, and I'm not sure that, even though, of course, many of us presumably, around this virtual table right now did do a lot of handwriting and music when we were younger, when we were starting out. I don't expect many of us actually choose to do it that way very often these days, because even if we've got something like a Surface and StaffPad available to us, because although, I mean, what David Hearn, who's the the inventor of StaffPad, he's a guy I know quite well. What he says is that he finds that writing music out with a pen sort of triggers a different kind of activity. It's a different kind of activity for him because it's more relaxed and it's more extemporaneous and it's not quite so kind of boom, 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 get the job done. And I think there is something in that. And so I think that there's probably a need for us to have all of these kinds of multimodal inputs available to us. But, for me, I still can't quite get away from the fact that it's always going to be quicker for you to hit one key like A or play one chord, blonk, on your MIDI keyboard and have the program know unambiguously what you meant, than for it to try and infer it from your handwriting. And I say that's not to say that I don't think there is value in that handwritten input, because I absolutely think there is. And in a way, because what we are trying to do with Dorico is to kind of connect to the tradition of printed music. There's no reason why we couldn't also in the fullness of time connect to the tradition of writing music, of handwriting music. But I think that there is definitely always going to be a gap between the efficiency that a dedicated input method that makes use of lots and lots of buttons, basically. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right? Is that having a button that is going to give a certain result each time, whether that's a key on your keyboard or a key on your MIDI keyboard or on whatever other controller you're using, that is very, very hard to beat in terms of efficiency and in terms of the program being able to directly understand your intention. And I feel that's what's really missing from these pen-based and touch-based input methods. All that being said, we tried very hard to make all the buttons in Dorico in its UI big enough that you could jab them with your finger on a Surface or a similar sort of device, and we've added swiping and panning controls to the dialogues and things so that they work okay on a touch-based device. But I think it's fair to say that we haven't devoted a huge amount of time and effort to trying to kind of optimize for pen and touch yet, but that's not to rule it out for the future.
Speaking on that,
go ahead, Chase.
Sorry, just to connect with your topic there that you're talking about, Daniel. I was wondering, how long can you kind of foresee the technology with perfecting, if you can, the MIDI input versus the touch integration based off of just people's workflow? So maybe like if there's like a mode that works for people who want to write versus like for me, I really want the MIDI input to be accurate as possible, and I struggled a lot with that with number one finale, and then I jumped to Sibelius and it was a little bit better in terms of just at least doing transcriptions. How long do you think it will be until it can actually get really, really close to the efficiency that most people would kind of work between.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a sense they're both still unsolved problems, really. So obviously, if you imagine your perfect MIDI workflow, it would probably involve no click. It would involve you being able to kind of stop and start when you liked. It would involve the program kind of understanding when you were just trying something out and when you were actually really kind of performing something. It would capture every nuance of your performance, but it would produce beautiful notation. It would be able to infer key and time and tempo and everything else. So how far away from that? Quite a long way. Despite the fact that we've had MIDI for 35, 36 years and we've had notation software for 25 years nearly, so I think, or maybe, Finale, 30 years this year. I bet they won't publicize that too much. Like, hey, Finale is 30. Although they did when it was 25, so maybe they will. Anyway, I shouldn't be mean about that. That's, one day Dorico will be 30 as well. And I'll be very old then. So, but I think similarly with pen, the challenge there is that the actual technology is great. The feel of the stylus, whether it's on a Surface or whether it's an Apple Pencil on an iPad Pro, they feel great, and the responsiveness is perfect, and the resolution of what it does matches exactly what you write. And the handwriting recognition, at least on Microsoft's Ink stuff, is incredibly good. Even again with I'm a lefty. And I'm a rubbish lefty as well, and I haven't really written seriously since I was a student. So, but it can still interpret what I've done perfectly. But I feel like all of the notation recognition stuff that we've had so far, whether it's Neutron stuff in NotateMe, whether it's StaffPad, whether it's the thing that's sort of in Notion and in various other apps as well now, all of them come with compromises. Either they expect you to change the way that you write the music, or they have a very limited set of symbols and markings that they understand, and also they often are lacking the kind of the musical nuance of the understanding, so it's very, very easy to confuse those systems. So I feel like in both of those areas, because again, really what you want is for it to be as natural as you basically humming a melody effectively, except doing it on paper, bonk, 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 quick as you like, and it being perfectly interpreted. So I sort of wonder which one we might get to first. I feel like for our team, we're more likely to put more effort into the MIDI side of things because it matches our particular sort of set of skills, if that doesn't sound like something Liam Neeson would say, knowing full well that it does sound like something Liam Neeson would say. But I will find you and I will notate you. It's I think both of them have a long way to go, basically, because I think what they really come down to is that there's an awful lot of there's a big gap between what our input is in both cases and what we would ideally like the output to be. So it's tough, but it's an interesting, both of those are still, as I say, MIDI obviously being the much longer lived one, but I think they're both still interesting frontiers. And I think they're also areas where, academics are doing research and where, different companies are also trying to push things forward. So, watch this space, I guess. We'll certainly do our best to close the gap on the MIDI side, and we'll certainly look at opportunities to work with StaffPad, work with other third parties who've been putting all of the time and energy into the pen-based stuff as well. So ideally, again, the goal will be for Dorico to kind of sit in that workflow comfortably rather than necessarily Dorico having to do every bit of it itself.
I have three questions for you. One is about import, one is about beginners, and one is about NAMM. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, iZotope, for supporting us and letting us put on awesome shows like this where we get to interview awesome people like Daniel. So thank you, iZotope. So the first question I had is about import. Like if I have Sibelius some exports or something, can I just pull those in? Are there any difficulty there?
I think import works pretty well, actually. So you, in both Sibelius and Finale, both recent versions of those, actually Finale going back donkey's years and Sibelius going back through 7, and with a plugin back through previous versions, you can export music XML files, and Dorico is really a pretty great music XML importer. I think that, philosophically what we do is we toss away all of the formatting information and so on, and we basically treat that music XML file as if it was just a repository of the semantic musical data, never mind the presentation, because we've spent so long over the course of developing Dorico focusing on making the presentation of music just sort of given raw input really, really much better than anything that the other programs can do. You can just basically toss the music XML file and it will produce something that looks really pretty good out of the box, often as good as something that's taken you a decent amount of time to tweak in either Sibelius or Finale. So that does work very well. I will, own up to the fact that going the other way, which obviously is sometimes necessary, you need to go back to Sibelius or Finale because, say, the person you're working with is still running those programs. Our Music XML export is nowhere near as good as our Music XML import at the moment, and improving that is definitely going to be a focus for us in the future. I wouldn't say that it's a one-way trip, like music comes in but it never goes out again, but it's the fidelity of what goes out of Dorico is certainly nowhere near as high as what we're able to import. So that's definitely something that we need to spend some more time on, and we will.
Well, that's a difficult road anyway, even when I deal with OMFs and AAFs all the time. And there's no perfect solution there. I don't think that puzzle has been solved yet by anybody. On the talking about imports, is there a creative process where I could take like the MIDI from some song? I'm trying to think of something. And just bring it into Dorico, and it would start to mock up kind of based off of pitches, based off of notes, try to mock up some sort of classical version of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely do that. You could bring in a MIDI file and then, add, say, some string players, and then just start copying and pasting material from whatever, like, grand stave instrument has been imported. And yeah, I mean, I think it is definitely, and again, that sort of arranging workflow is very important to us, and particularly for people who are working in your field and for film and TV and so on. That kind of arranging, you've got something that somebody's done maybe in the sequencer. Some of it's going to be played live for a bit of color. Maybe some of it's going to go straight out of the box. How do you then get that transition from the original MIDI or whatever it was? Maybe you've only had stems or something, you haven't even got any MIDI. How do you get from there to something you can put in front of players and record? And we've started down that road. We have a lot more tools to add there. I know that Finales in particular miss things like the explode and reduce sort of paste operations that program has and does very well. And just yesterday I was talking to Stefan, who's our sort of main note input and editing kind of developer, about that and how we're gonna tackle that. So we definitely want to make that workflow as smooth as possible, so that you can do whatever it is, whether it's mashing up some MIDI file with something else, or taking some raw MIDI of a big template and sort of somehow marshalling that into the appropriate form for producing parts and so on. So, and as I say, the MIDI transcription is pretty good. There's not many options really. As long as it's somewhat on the beat, then you should find that it does a good job. And again, we do intend to add features for kind of post-quantize and post-quantize quantization, as it were, so that you can kind of re-quantize stuff in the future.
Gotcha. So from a student perspective, is there a pathway into design specifically for people to get started?
Yes, I mean, we tried reasonably hard to, I think, Mike said earlier on that Dorico does introduce some new paradigms that, even if you're familiar with other scoring programs, it might take a bit of getting used to. And so, we've tried various things to sort of help people along the way. When you first run Dorico, each time you sort of go into one of the modes of its 5 modes for the first time, you get a little sort of UI tour where it kind of introduces you to the main components of each mode. My colleague Anthony, who is actually really day-to-day is responsible for the UI and UX of Dorico. He's also spent a huge amount of time over the last sort of 12 months making now more than 50 videos, which are all on our YouTube channel, which are very, they're not the kind of usual tutorial video that you might find. Like, my wife's a photographer and she's always looking stuff up on Photoshop and so on, and there's nothing more frustrating than that video that goes, well, hi guys, it's Tuesday morning and today I'm going to get into showing you something about Photoshop. But first I really want to tell you about something amusing my cat did yesterday.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, so Anthony he keeps, it's like, how stand-up comedians have a tight 15. Well, Anthony tries to keep his videos to a tight 3 if possible. And so they awesome. They're no muss, no fuss, and you can get in there. And so what's really nice about them is that, if, for example, you are starting out with Dorico, day one, and you're importing, say, a Music XML file and you want to find out how to edit it, you could just work through, you can just brew a pot of coffee or make a nice big pot of Yorkshire tea and watch that write mode playlist on our YouTube channel. It's like, I think it's 8 videos. It's less than 30 minutes. And you will have a really, really solid understanding of the concepts and indeed a lot of the mechanics that go into actually inputting and editing music in Dorico. We've also been putting a lot of time recently into our documentation. We when Dorico first came out, it had slightly weak documentation, and that was, you know, partly a kind of logistical thing. The authors are all based in Hamburg, and obviously the team building Dorico based in London, and we were moving so fast as we came up on the release, and indeed continue to move very fast after the release, that we were working way quicker than the writers in Hamburg could keep up with us. And it got to the point, the Christmas after we finished the very first version, they kind of said, we can't do this anymore. We need to find another way of doing documentation. And so we then basically started recruiting for somebody to join us in our London team, which meant that, you know, the downside of that was that there was basically nobody working in the documentation for a few months while we were finding the right person. But the good news is that we did find the right person, and she's fantastic. And she's been working since beginning of July now, so kind of about the last 5 months or so. And we published just before Christmas, you know, like literally 500 new pages of documentation that she'd written over that 5-month period, which really, you know, start to round things out. We still have more work to do. I think it'll probably be another 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a little longer, before everything that Dorico can do today is fully documented up to the depth that we would like. But the approach that we took with the documentation was very specific. We wanted to make it Googleable. So all of the documentation for Dorico is on a particular URL. It's steinberg.help/Dorico. And the idea is that, you know, whatever question you might have, you can just literally go to Google, because this is how I find help for every program I use these days. And about you guys, I very rarely, my first port of call would be the manual. I would go to Google and say, how do I do X in Y? And so we've tried to design Dorico's documentation to be Googleable like that. And you know, I think that hopefully being able to kind of put these various things together, we have the videos, we have the help that's inside the app, we have our improving documentation, you know, hopefully all together that helps you get up that initial learning curve. Because, you know, we're certainly not pretending that, you know, you'll sit down at Dorico and in 2 minutes you'll be composing like Mozart. You know, it's not like that. But we think that
wait a minute.
Yeah, I know. But with an hour, you know, put an hour in, a little bit of reading, a little bit of trying stuff out. You know, don't make your first project a Wagner style, you know, magnum opus cycle of 5 operas. You know, start with an arrangement for a couple of instruments or a handful of instruments that, you know, and don't start under some massive time pressure as well. And then I think you're in the right frame of mind to actually be able to get to grips with the program and make a good start with it.
Those videos introduced to me. Oh, sorry, Kyle, didn't mean to trot on you.
Oh, no, please. I'm going to ask about NAMM here towards the end. Oh, gosh, I think our hour has almost flown by. So we might want to wrap up with just a couple of final questions, I guess. Go ahead, Mike.
One thing that really impressed me about Dorico, which I learned from the videos, I had never noticed this in the manual of the forums, is what I'll call input AI. And it's easy for me to describe just by pointing out one example of this, and maybe you can explain how heavily this figures into the input paradigm. But you can select a passage of music and type P less than FFF greater than P, and Dorico will create a set of dynamics at the boundaries of the passage of music, put in the central dynamic in the middle, and put 2 hairpins for you. And this is a task that it's not a joyous process in any notation software. And the ability to just type in this cute little text abbreviation and have it translated into layout terms, it blew my mind. And I just stumbled upon this in one of the videos. I'm curious, how deeply does that kind of AI figure into Dorico's workflow?
Yeah, I mean, all the way down, basically. Again, that was another thing that we decided on very early on. I was actually inspired by seeing how quickly people who use the old text-based notation programs like Score, like Amadeus, you know, which are still used in publishing to this day, and even Lilypond, how quickly people can actually do that. And so I thought, well, this is, you know, what we need to do here is find a way of reducing all of this complex input of all these different kinds of markings down to as consistent and small a little language, as it were, of keystrokes you need to know and sort of inputs that you need to learn as possible. And so that's where this idea for the popovers came from. It's basically a way of driving everything through the keyboard. So you can use the mouse, you can go to the panels, you can click things, you can drag them in just like in any other program. But I I'm so pleased to hear you say it's like input AI. Yes, absolutely. To make it so that with a few keystrokes you can input something that would have taken, I mean, in Finale, just even putting in those, it's two different tools for those dynamics. You've got to do control, double click, drag to put the hairpins in. It's whereas in Dorico, yeah, it's literally select a passage, Shift D for the popover, P less than, FFF greater than PPP, return, boom, it's done. And we've tried to do that for everything. And I think that's really, you hit the nail exactly on the head, Mike. It's all about trying to make it easy for the user to express their musical intention as efficiently as possible.
That feature made me really happy. Emotional.
It makes me happy too. It's one of the things I enjoy demoing
my hands
about
happy.
Dorico. Yeah, exactly. Makes all of me happy. Gives me a little warm glow all over.
I have one last question from me, at least. Were there any composers that you were looking at when it came to, here is a type of score that we should be able to hit really easily? And I actually just want to show this picture because it's hilarious. It's not a real composer, but I love the caption because it's Peter Schickele and PDQ Bach. Towards the end of his life, PDQ became very frugal. This attempt to write an entire piano sonata on one page of manuscript paper has yet to be deciphered.
That's great. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, there's like various composers that I like that, they do some weird things, your Ligeti or Arvo Par or someone like that. Were there any other composers that you were thinking about, or were there particular scores perhaps that the team referenced while working on what should this software do well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great luxuries of starting from a blank piece of paper and also having QA people on board even before, months before there was any software to test, was that we could basically, I spend a lot of time researching things in the British Library, and they spend a lot of time going through, the corpus of CWMN and finding interesting examples. So we looked at Lachenmann, we looked at Xenakis, we looked at What is that?
I think that's the gardeners outside are mowing my lawn. So, Kyle, if you want to mute me, I won't take offense.
Yes, Xenakis is great.
Yeah, well, I think that we had a little bit of music concrete there, so maybe we also looked at Stockhausen, and that was the helicopter quartet just starting just outside of Mike's window. So no, we definitely looked at a lot of different scores, and I won't say that Dorico actually gets you like right bang up to the minute with things that because of course the amazing thing about contemporary music is that people are inventing new notations in like on a work by work basis, and what's difficult to say is how many of those are going to catch on and how many of them are going to be sort of flash in the pan things. So we sort of consciously went up to kind of Boulet's 60s kind of thing, really, with a couple of things newer than that. So like the non-power of two denominator tuplets that Boulez started using later in his life, after he kind of started with fractional time signatures, then he went on to these kind of non-power of two time signatures. We support those, and we obviously aim to support microtonality, polytonality, polytempo, polymeter, all these sorts of things kind of as natively as we can. True graphical scores is kind of outside of our comfort zone. So if you wanted to do something like, the sort of more abstract things that Cage did or something, we can't do that. We can't do the beautiful things that Crumb does with his sort of spiral staves and so on. But basically, if it uses basically uses horizontal staves and notes basically on those staves, even if it's got some, and we haven't got all of these features in yet for things like wavy lines and frames as used by Ludoslavsky and people, but all of those things are definitely have always been in our plans from the beginning. And just like real-time MIDI input, it's just a case of kind of working our way down the priorities list to get to the point where the next thing to work on is that is frame notation, and that'll be an exciting day when we get there, and we are excited to work on that stuff.
Get on it, Daniel. Crack those whips over there. I want Cage scores. Pristine.
Yeah. Okay. Noted.
Well, the last question I have is, will Dorico have a presence at NAMM next week? And better yet, will we see you there?
Yes, I'm coming to LA on Monday. We'll be getting in the back of a cramped aeroplane and squeezing myself in next to somebody else and sitting there for 11 hours to get to LA. I'll actually be at the American Film Institute on Tuesday evening for the Society of Composers and Lyricists, giving a Dorico presentation there. And you can, if you're in the LA area and you want to come to that, you can. You go to thescl.com and details are available there. It's free for SCL members, and there's a modest sort of entrance fee for anybody else. And there'll be drinks and what have you, and a chance to chat after that event if you'd like to do that. And then from Thursday to Sunday at the Anaheim Convention Center, we will be there. I will be there myself Thursday through Saturday, and I will be giving a Dorico demonstration in the Steinberg Room, which is in Elite Ballroom B, just next to Elite Ballroom 3 in the Marriott, which is the hotel where Yamaha has all of its exhibition space, just outside Hall A of the convention center. So yeah, do swing by. My colleague John Barron, who's our product specialist, who also does the monthly Discover Dorico live streams on our YouTube channel, he'll be there all day, every day. I've got meetings, so I'll be on and off the stand, but I will definitely be at the stand every day at 3 o'clock, because I'll be giving a Dorico demonstration, and I would be delighted to meet anybody who wants to come find me. Also, if you want to meet me and you can't make it to the 3 o'clock demo, then just send me a tweet. I'm at Spreadbury on Twitter, and I'll be checking my Twitter and what have you while I'm there. So just drop me a line. I'd love to meet up.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for giving us part of your Saturday. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Great.
Woo-hoo. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess we'll leave it with that. Any last questions anybody wants to squeeze in?
Well, one last thing. It is the Game Audio Hour, so have you played any cool video games lately?
Of course.
I'm afraid I'm a bit behind. I've been putting a lot of hours on my commute into Stardew Valley on the Switch, which I think is wonderful. And I'm hoping that I can get Penny to marry me, but she's playing hard to get at the moment, so I'm working on that. Obviously, I've been playing Mario Odyssey. My kids also absolutely adore Mario Odyssey, so we've been playing that together. I think that is one of, if not the very finest games of all time. I think it's absolutely phenomenal.
Whoa. And all time?
Yeah, of all time.
Whoa.
Okay.
Of all time. And this is speaking of somebody whose first game was on the Commodore PET in 1980. So
there you go.
So, yeah, I think so. But I don't get as much time to play games as I would like to. But I'm a great admirer of and especially of the audio work that you guys do in these games. You really add so much to the experience, and so thank you for all of your work on all the games that we all enjoy playing so much.
Well, thank you very much, and looking forward to spending even more time with Dorico. Well, with that, I'll wrap up by saying please like us, subscribe, spread the news. Again, this is not a live show, so if you were putting comments in the chat, we weren't able to answer them. Sorry about that, but we'll be back to doing our regular live. Oh, sorry. What did you say, Chase?
We'll get to him next show.
Yeah, that's true. We'll get to him next show. And with that, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. And we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.